Okay. In the name of God, the most benevolent and the most merciful, in honor of the original unconditional moment that all conditional moments have arisen from and will return to, in honor of the world host and the system admin beyond the world drone. Hello, everyone. I would like to speak about a very profound realization, to speak about it further, that's happened and revolutionized my life. And it's an interesting perspective that I find is not common for a person to speak about, especially in this time or in this era of the historic progress of human beings. I've written, you're an unknown force interacting with an unknown moment. The rest is simulated. Underneath it in the description, in the subtitle, to write it in the title, I've brought the question of unconditional faith, because usually we human beings have conditional faith, having faith in a certain form or a certain condition or a certain perspective. When you have faith in a certain perspective, we call that hope. you know and I've written, honestly, the liberation, the first version I wrote the title, but I've written, will be liberated when your unknown self has faith in the unknown world. And I will be speaking about the unknown life. And an idea that is not very common is that we are under the impression, if somebody was to ask me right now, what is the purpose of the human? Like, what are human beings doing in this world? The game majority of us are playing is to maintain, this is a very elegant way to put it, to maintain a coherent self across the conditions of our life. And we maintain this coherent self as a strategy and response to the instability and uncertainty we find in our lives. What does this mean? This means when you look at human beings, before your ideas overlay upon them for you to have an impression on them, the basic human function, so far as how we've been conditioned, human beings identify. There's a very interesting point I made in previous lectures. That point was I wanted to draw a parallel between how in the future there will be a cyborg era. Okay, and the word cyborg, for those unfamiliar, unacquainted, it's a sci-fi term meaning imagine humans that are half machine, half human. Human anymore. It's between two worlds, half machine, half biological. Okay, now I am making a parallel to this, to something that happened to human beings in the past. I need to make this point because of the parallel is this, that we are not cyborgs. I'm not half machine, but I am half ideology. Look at nature. There was an unconscious, there emerged an unconscious, natural, objective being. This unconscious, objective being itself transformed, became a subject to itself. And now we're not living like natural, we're not living like Tarzan, we're not living like animals in nature. We're living as a sort of hilarious object cyborgs. You're 50% imagine an object and 50% a subject. Okay? And this is very uncommon because when you communicate to animals, right, we don't, I mean, of course, we don't know the depth of animal, and perhaps like in Vedic thought, they consider human animal bodies. But without going there too far, I am saying that our humanized meaning comes, okay, the meaning, okay, the objectivity is natural still. So there has been an estimate from 300,000 years ago, according to AI. And so considering a 300,000 year civilization, that means if people ask you like how old is civilization, it will be like 300 years, man. You know, and in that 300,000, excuse me, not 300 years, 300,000 years, 300K years. Okay, in this 300,000 years, estimate of 117 billion original naturally born human beings. Okay, 8 billion of all the human beings considered from that 300,000 year range that has existed are alive right now. I am one of them. We are, and you might not understand the value of this now. You're like, big deal, do you know? And I'll tell you what the big deal is. We are still biological beings. We're still biological beings. Responsibility not just for its past, for its present, its future. And the success of our presence really is dependent on your responsibility for the future. This is why human beings work. This is why human beings, they coordinate, you know, because we can see further than where we are, but internally. So going back to this point that the human being we find now, yes, 100% biological, objective, semi-objective. In the future, it's going to be like semi-objective, semi-subjective, and semi-mechanical. Even though I encourage technology not to enter the skin, like that's the walls of a kingdom. I mean, on some level, let this way, like there are human beings that have pacemakers. We have, you know, my father personally had a heart, was I forget the terminology for it, but they have these cameras that they put through the veins of the human being, right? To go see if their veins are calcified or not, you know. So be careful, guys, in regards to your diet and all this. You know, it's the taste of food is not worth, like, how do I tell you, the you know, the calcification of veins, you know, and ending up, I don't know, I feel it's the same for others. But I was born in 1991. My parents, like especially their generations, if they did not live, if they were raised in the city, if they did not live a focused life, you know, that means they, in some sense, at the end of their lives, are taking lots of medicine, you know. And this happened not to my father, take too much medicine, but of course, doctors know best to some degree. But what I'm trying to say, it's still a bit too soon for connect chips to people's brains, and when they don't pay their membership fee, your IQ falls down a couple units, you know. So, to carry on, currently we're living as semi-objective and semi-subjective, sort of like, you know, cyborgs of 2026, the human being is not just basing its reality. That means when it accesses, when you when you log into the day in the morning, you are not just experiencing the physical realm. You are experiencing the meaning that instantaneously, through your conditioning, arises in the forms. Okay? So human beings are looking at objects and behind their eyes, coloring them in with subjective meaning. Now, what is very fascinating is that they have conditioned us to treat ourselves as an individual. Can you guys hear me? And so, to continue, should be audible, folks. I don't know. So now in 2026, human beings are not just responsible for the realities they find or for the events that take place in front of their eyes, but also the events that take place behind their eyes. Through the way I have realized, I was conditioned differently. This is my own realizations that brought me here. I call it Mr. Within's inner realm and outer realmism, outer realm and inner realmism, whichever way you'd like to say it. What does this mean? In front of our eyes, the member of the human species accesses an objective and a public objective server, a public objective existential server. Behind your eyes, you access a private subjective non-existential non-physical server. Sorry, I should have said physical, not existential. So in front of your eyes, you access a public, objective, physical server. Behind your eyes, you access a private, subjective, non-physical yet visible server. And so we have an outer realms and an inner realms. You all do. This whole time, the fact that when I was young, reality had convinced me that in some sense a person is their body, a person is what they communicate. Nonsense. They are the presence of an instantaneous unknown awareness that watches their thoughts before they act. Your mind is living ahead of you, and once you trust it, it animates. That means that, think of it this way: the complexity of this, we can fragment it. You can see, you can analyze the structure through a division, or you can unify it through one experience. I'm going to open the notepad here, so look at the screen. Um, Whoever's interested. So let us take this inner and outer realm approach further, for it explains what is exactly going on in the human experience and where it can even lead, because we need to acknowledge a certain geometry if we want to have a sort of structural analysis of how these forms in the present will enter the form future. What is happening for the human being? An inner realm analysis, one, and an outer realm analysis. In the outer realm, we find an edgeless, endless appearing physical place. We call this the world, the outer world. Or I should say it different. An edgeless, endless, but still conditional by it being physical. It is conditional place and a conditional entity that has a physical component. I don't know, that is physical, that is physically present. We cannot ignore the physics of the matter. This is the outer self. So think of it that we have a self. I'll just say this. Think of it this way. We have a self, we have a world, and we have a context to that self and world. So we have one, the self, two, world of the self, three, world of the self, but I'll write it here. In other words, in front of our eyes, we access a physical self in a physical world, unknown moment. In the inner realms, you find something more than in just in the outer realms. So you find a subjective self, a subjective can arise to that self, and you find something else, an unknown awareness as the whole moment. In other words, if I use this example the other day. And let me see if I can actually draw this. Okay, there we go. I did it. Oh my God, I found a way. So you guys can see this. This is what I can actually draw here. That's crazy. All right. So think of it this way. Oh my God. I'm drawing it on with the touchpad. Oh my God. So we have a circle, then we have another circle, and we have another circle in it. Okay? Guys, it's hard to draw on a touchpad. Okay? This is the self. I'll put an S. Okay? This is the world, and this is, I'll put C as like the context. Okay? And we have a relationship that is like this. Can we, yeah. Let me see if this is showing. Yeah, this is showing. Okay. So you have self, world, and the context of the world and the self that are in. Okay. Now, when our attention starts from here, that means let me draw it. So from here, oh my God. To here. My God, this is so hard to draw on this. Okay. Like you see this whole thing. So when you go from outside the furthest concentric circle to the center of the concentric circle, okay, you have an outer realm. This is, how do I say it? The inner self and the outer self, okay, is just a relationship. All right. It's a relationship starting from you or starting from outside of you. Of me, I end up being an existential being. So from this, from here, from the center, think of it this way. This is going to be very hard to draw, but it's like even a circle inside that in a three-dimensional. I can't draw it here. I need a pen. Okay, I can't draw it like this. Oh, oops. Okay, this whole time, guys, let me simplify it. Let me find an inner rhythm. In my experience, there's nothing more fascinating that I have been made conscious of, I've been made aware of in this life than realizing that I have been just living as a known self in a known world, and this known self has been trying to process and find the exact strategy to live in this known world. But when we look at this realm, it's dualistically positioned in the same way there is the known, there is the unknown, there is night, there is day, there's good, there is bad. So we find a dualism. So the human experience is very dualistic. However, this duality is very uniquely positioned for the human being, that behind your eyes you're an experiential moment of being. In front of your eyes, how do I say it, you find yourself as an object. Behind your eyes you can identify as a subject. But in actuality, the point I wanted to make between the inner realm and the outer realm analysis is simply this, that they are both within an unknown moment, and the concentric circle that contains all the circles of the human experience is unknown. So you, fellow members of my species, fellow human beings, have been living from the beginning of your life a conditional life in a conditional place, in the assumption that it's a conditional place. But because we don't have access to the conditions that surpass the human comprehension, it is actually more unknown than known. And what I am sharing simply translates as an emotion to me in the same, I would say emotionally, it would be like this, that you've lived like 34 years on this planet, okay, 12,500 days on this planet. And it occurs to you that you are actually an unknown force, an unknown presence. And what you have identified as yourself is the simulations of the moment. That means right now, I find my body, as a human being, I find my body, physical body, in an experiential moment of awareness. Okay, that means my body is a part of my whole experience, of the whole awareness of the moment. The thoughts, these words I'm saying, they are part of my unknown moment of being. Do you understand what I'm saying? I'm saying, imagine there's this unknown moment, unknown sphere. Within this unknown sphere there is known relationships, but these known relationships, due to the dualistic nature and the symmetrical nature of reality to some degree, they are dependent. In the same way, we find, think of it this way, if a word, imagine the words in a dictionary suddenly became conscious, and one word was like, yo man, I'm freedom, I'm the word freedom, and I have an independent existence of myself. There's no other word in this dictionary that is like as the letters FREEDOM. Do you know? However, when you go look at the definition of what, when you go look at the meaning of the word freedom, it is using other words to explain itself. What does this mean? When it comes to the experience of meaning for the human being, it is dependent on other meaning. It is a circulatory. Its explanatory power is circulatory. It's circular. We need this word, we need these words to explain that word, and we need that word to other words to explain these words. Do you understand? So we are using, it's like we're in this room and we're using like the forms in one part of the room to give meaning to other forms in the other part of the room, yet they are still the limited forms within an unknown room. And so the reason, there's someone named Mr. Within speaking to you right now, is to simply suggest that the experience, that means ask yourself, oh, to me, you're an unknown being in experiencing an unknown moment, and the rest is the simulations are actually the divine conversation, the divine expression. Do you know? That means we're using conditions. Think of it this way: we're assuming the whole moment that we're all existing in is conditional, and then we're using conditions in one part of that moment to explain the conditions in other parts of the moment. And it suddenly dawned on me that, am I a known self living in a known world, or am I an unknown force experiencing an unknown moment? That means everything that I have known, everything that has been conditionally a form that my consciousness can acknowledge, it has not been my unknown life. I have lived, I gave a talk maybe like a month ago about like how I felt I reached the midpoint of my life, and I find myself to be this to be a very blessing, that to experience my unknown self in an unknown world, because the conditions are simulated and codependent. They're interdependent, I guess, in their meaning. That means the brilliance of language is how the alphabet leads to all the development of the words. Do you understand? And it's even more fascinating. I mean, I made it clear yesterday in a lecture called The Irony of the Concept of Physicalism, that in some sense, human physical, the conscious physical, the experience of existence and the validity of existence, independent to our experience, cannot explain the subjective experience. That means two things are confirmed in all human experience. Okay, and access to an objective realm, the physicality. I am not saying you're not physical. I am saying that physicality is not just physicality. And so, how many among the human species have the courage to be conditioned in an environment to be something specific and to live specifically and to idolize that specificity? Do you know? And how many members of the human species have the courage to stand as the honesty of the world? Because in utter honesty, in absolute honesty, there is more unknown than known. We notice that we see way less than what is actually out there. So in some sense, we are not in a complete moment to have complete conclusions. Do you understand? So the world is still unknown, the mysteries still stand, the fascination of the realm calls upon those who can acknowledge it. And this is not something easy to hear, and I don't expect people to hear this and not have any, you know you know um, like counter opinions to this. I am just telling you, as a human being, after 12,500 years, I feel this is the mercy of the system admin beyond the world room, That it's like, okay, you have displayed conditional faith as a conditional self in the unconditional power to the conditional world. In other words, it feels to me like I have graduated from being a known self in a known world. And I feel my lifetime, believe it or not, I don't feel like me anymore. I am not me. I have never been me. Every idea that I have identified with has been a simulated idea. Before I identified with it, I was not identifying with it. It comes and goes. And so the mystery of the true presence of the human being calls upon the human being. That this whole time, human beings are just living from one side of the coin, not realizing life is intended to live with the other side of the coin. Now, when we wonder about higher planes, I am Muslim. I believe in a system admin out beyond the world room that, in some sense, has no condition can equate it. Okay, but this makes me fascinated because in Islamic theology, God has 99 names. These names are attributes. These are qualities of the divine. But these are qualities of the divine that are incomprehensible to conditional beings. The way they are incomprehensible to conditional beings is in the sense that, for imagine as a human being, um, as a Muslim, you see one of God's names is all merciful. We do not know a human being that is all merciful. And there may be human beings that are merciful to others, but we do not know if they're merciful to themselves. I have been very polite to others in the outer realms, but in my inner realms, you think I've been polite with myself? You think I've had to deal with my chaos internally because it's a part of me understood, why does the outer realm deserve to see my chaos? The world already has too much inefficiency. In order to truly build an advanced civilization, to truly advance humanity, we must wonder about the most advanced states of the human experience. The most advanced states of the human experience is its realization of its unconditional relationship with everything. Do you understand? That means, what is greater to you? Unconditional love or conditional love? Unconditional happiness or conditional happiness? Do you know? Unconditional power or conditional power? Most human beings, they seek unconditional power. Right now, in the world we're living, there is a hierarchical system of class distinction. Do you understand? And there are those who have, to them it feels like unconditional power. They are so wealthy that they can do anything. Like I was looking into how billionaires live, and like, the billionaire goes to Morocco for a shawarma, goes to, or like flies, and then flies to like Silicon Valley for a tech meeting. You know what I mean? They're in some sense living more unconditionally than beings that are living conditionally. And when you look at civilizational intelligence, when you look at what a civilization is, when you notice this hierarchy, you notice that the contrast is freedom is leading towards the unconditional, is going towards the unconditional. Do you know? Why do you think there are so many religious people praying to God, trying to align themselves to the algorithms found in religion, right? Believing these algorithms are beyond the world room. I firmly believe revelation is beyond the world room. What I don't like, though, is humans assuming that they understand revelation. Do you understand? That means instructions from or commands from an unconditional being. A conditional being can follow them to the best of their ability, but you cannot have absolute claim as a conditional being. You cannot have an unconditional absolute claim. So the issue is, what breaks my heart as a Muslim is seeing that there are the human side, the human nature, yeah, what's the term? Depurifying, like impurifying. Do you know? The divine nature, though, because the divine nature is not in the comprehension of man, it is accessed through presence, which I am here to explain to you today. In other words, How many human beings on this earth, especially after the age of 40, realize it's about love? There was this dude who was given a speech to this doctor who was given a speech to these graduates of some university. I don't know, it was Harvard or whatever. It was like some next level university. And this guest speaker said, I have been at the deathbed of 1,000 people who took their last breath as someone in the medical practice. And he said that none of them were like, yo, man, bring me back my trophies so I look at them one more time. All of them were like, I want to see my loved ones. And we are living in a civilization that rather than it prioritizes the advanced experience of the human being, it prioritizes the external status of the human being. We're not living in an advanced civilization. But it doesn't mean we cannot see further ahead. Just like somebody who's sitting at a TV is watching TV, they have the remote in their hand, they suddenly feel hungry, and their mind, they're still sitting at the couch watching TV, but their mind has already opened the fridge door and they're seeing inside the fridge. Do you know, they can see themselves pouring like a glass of orange juice or defrosting a meal or something, you know, like they can your mind lives ahead. Okay, but your mind is having a conditional claim over the moment. If you think you're an, this is why I have a love and hate relationship with language. If you think you're an idea, it's hard to watch. If you realize ideas are tools, you know, then there is more of an accuracy there. But the whole point of it is, in your life as a human being, start wondering about the conditional and unconditional. And I'm just saying that I have realized that simultaneously all the conditional identity, all the identity I can have with conditions, it's being a state. All of it is being a state of awareness. So, in other words, consciousness, the subjective experience, is an unconditional verb, or is closer to an unconditional verb. This is why they can't explain consciousness, because they're only using nouns. They want to put consciousness, the explanation of consciousness, into a noun. But the subject, even they're using objects and subjects to try to explain a force that moves them. But the force is neither the subject or the object. You know, that means when I drive a car, am I the car? No. But in that moment, the force that drives, steers the wheel, do you know, is like, do you know, I'm more like an unknown life force happening, rather than a specific idea owning other ideas to think that it knows itself. Owning the moment is an idea to think that that's knowledge. This realization I'm sharing, for anybody who is sick physically, it will heal you. And of course, if it's in the stars, if it's written in the stars for you as well. I became liberated from having to be a specific self that has a limited access and interpretation of the specific world. My unknown life began very consciously 3 days ago. And I cannot tell you what, how, like, there is a cheerfulness in realizing the idea of you is not you. And even realizing that the body, I wanted to leave this for another talk, but I'll say it. The body is not you. And if you start treating your body like an organ, like an organism outside of you that only listens to your inner realms, everything is going to make sense to you. That a majority of physical illnesses is arising because the body is being the subconscious instruction that it is sick. I with fear. Fear can lead to limited identity. Understanding liberates fear. If you are afraid, that means you do not understand enough of the moment. But the greatest understanding, and I think this is life, I think this is, I'm making a very bold claim here. I'm pretty much saying we are all living improperly. And so the human life is not designed for you to be a conditional individual in a conditional world during the whole lifetime. At the midpoint, you start living as an unknown presence, experiencing the unknown moment. Okay. And I am telling you, this is, if you, that means, think of it this way. If when somebody says, I have faith in God, or I have faith in a concept, conceptual, if God is conceptual or if God is conditional to them. For example, for Muslims, God is unconditional, but for Christians, God is conditional. Okay. So there is a difference between having faith as a human, in having faith as a conditional self in a conditional world, or condition in it as a conditional self in a conditional world, to an unconditional power, than being an unconditional unknown self having faith in an unknown moment. Any human being who can attain this, you will understand what I mean, that you are liberated. You do not you do not touch the moment anymore. You don't even have the idea, I'm observing the moment, or I have to. Your inner realms settles like the ripples on a pond, as a poet had said. A majority of human energy even goes to the unnecessary subjective eventhood in their inner realms. That means my inner realms, it clears up. That means it just requires the awareness that in the same moment you were a conditional self in a conditional world, having a relationship with a conditional power as the whole moment. That's very secular, but for the, let's say, common religious, it's conditional self in a conditional world having a relationship with an unconditional power. I am telling you, when you realize you're an unconditional unknown self in an unknown world, and the whole moment is an unknown power, you are liberated. And faith is the realization of that. That means faith becomes easy through understanding. But the understanding of this is that if you're an unknown self, who has been suffering here? If you are an unknown life force that is like a verb that is moving the known life form as a noun, seldom is this said. How else can the known be liberated? It is, we have reached the era of becoming conscious of our unknown lives in an unknown world, in the presence of an unknown power. So, in other words, one final thing to say, in this moment, I used to think that I'm a person, I'm just my condition, and I'm speaking to other conditions. It is no longer that way for me. I'm an unknown force. My whole moment is an unknown moment. And everything that is translates as known, conscious, and knowledge is the simulator. So in other words, I'm that soul in this world that has realized that everybody has been missing on their unknown life. And it's very similar to how when you were a kid, before you had doubts projected from that individual self, you were an unknown being in an unknown moment, and you were liberated because before you told the moment how to be, the moment was, the moment is. In other words, I am more fascinated by the unknown presence, by how everything I have been known is occurring as an unknown force. So if you can have faith as an unknown self in an unknown world, through the realization that you're an unknown force interacting with an unknown moment, and everything within that moment is a part of it and simulated as an aspect of the moment, is not the whole moment, then us human beings to identify with knowledge, it's like we just took a part of the moment and thought we were it when we were beyond it. So in other words, the advanced humanity will be conscious of the unknown. And it would be a sort of full circle, because when we were in the food chain in nature, we were unconsciously unknown. Now we are consciously unknown. Thank you for listening. In the name of God, the most benevolent, the most merciful, and the most advanced, in honor of the original system, admin, and unconditional moment before all simulations of reality arose. Smile, O great soul. The greatness belongs to the whole moment, not just parts of it. Have a great day, guys. Thank you.